Okay. First of all, big aloha to all of you. And I want to share with you a Hawaiian word. And that Hawaiian word is mana'o. And for those of you unfamiliar with Hawaiian language, mana'o is spelled Manao. And what mana'o refers to as a Hawaiian word is a person's or an organization's knowledge base. And what we're here to do today is to share our mana'o. And it's not only a matter of us from Hawaii sharing with you, it's you, Mario, and Jim. It's a matter of you guys sharing mana'o with us as well. In February of 2020, I was lucky enough to participate in one of the most special workshops I've ever done and participated in. And basically, what made that workshop very special was that everybody who came left with a highly customized brand new ukulele, tenor ukulele, made by Eric Devine. And so that whole workshop turned out to be wonderful. And what we wanted to do in that workshop is the same thing, share mana'o. Because there is so much to ukulele beyond just playing or teaching a person to play. Thanks to Mike Chock and his founding of the Ukulele Guild of Hawaii, what that organization was able to do is to focus the attention on building ukuleles. So anyway, a little bit after this workshop in February of 2020, some of us who were there were talking one day and came up with this idea, and that idea is that we would share our mana'o in ukulele because there's so much. There's learning to play. There's building ukuleles. There are woods and forests that we can go to, cool forests here in Hawaii that have become a part of that. Shawn, Shawn, in terms of his interest in custom ukuleles and also in vintage ukuleles, and it's the reason why we gather today, has made and continues to make significant contributions. So, the reason why we're here today is to share mutually our mana'o, and that's basically it. So, what did we do? We decided to form a Facebook group. We're not interested in websites because the last thing we wanted to do is to form another bureaucracy. So we decided to start this Facebook group, and the name of the group is Mana'o Ukulele. And our purpose is only to share ukulele internationally as best we can, because we find that the more we are able to share our mana'o and encourage guests to share their mana'o, then everybody gains. There were 6 people who originally put together this mana'o group. 3 of us are here today. That is Randy Eisenberg, Shawn Yacavone, and me, Kimo Hussey. So, having said that about mana'o and sharing our collective mana'o, I now turn this back over to Shawn.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Uncle Kimo. And welcome, everyone. I'm really excited about the discussion today on the history of the ukulele and even going back to Madeira. Before we dive into some interesting topics here, I wanted to take this opportunity to thank everyone for watching, but also to welcome our panel here. We have a number, kind of an all-star cast, as it might be, in ukulele history and ukulele construction that has come together to be able to afford us this opportunity to share on their mana'o. In terms of their research, as well as their technique and design and understanding in ukulele construction. So to my right here, we have Michael Chock.
How's it all?
Hello, Mike.
yeah, and he is the Ukulele Guild of Hawaii founder and former president as well. And he'll be speaking to some of the discussions about woods, woods in Madeira specifically. We'll be touching a little bit on that. We'll also be touching a bit on construction techniques, diving in a little bit on the history of woodworking in Madeira and so forth. And so we have his expertise from the woodworking aspect as well there. We also have on our panel Jim Tranquada. We're really excited to have him here on this as well. He is certainly an ukulele historian, to say the least, but he has ties to Augusto Diaz, and that is his side of the family. And so there's some personal interest there that selfishly I am also benefiting from all of the research that he is doing for his own family. He's also a co-author, along with the late John King, of arguably, in my opinion, the definitive book on ukulele history, called The Ukulele: A History. This is a book that you absolutely must read, purchase. You can find it on Amazon and other places, but this will give you a good background, good understanding, good context into understanding the history of the ukulele to its earliest origins all the way to contemporary times. We also have Mário Freitas that's joining us from Madeira. Say aloha to you there, Mario. It's evening where Mario is at.
Hello. Good morning
there
to
he
everyone.
Is. Good morning on our side, and good evening to you, my friend.
Thank
and
you.
Mario is a good friend. He was kind enough to introduce me to a number of builders while I was in Madeira visiting and doing a little bit of research there a couple years back. Introduced me to a number of builders. Also, he's a musician himself. He's a builder himself as well. So he'll be able to lend his expertise and insight into building techniques, traditional techniques, woodworking, some of the woods that are used there in Madeira. There are certain woods that are also endemic, only locally found on Madeira, and also other woods that are brought in. As we all know, Madeira was on a trade route to a number of destinations. So he'll be able to lend his insight in that regard. We do have two others who are not joined on right now that may be popping in, so I'll introduce them as well. It's Tom Walsh and Nuni Walsh. Nuni is an ancestor or a descendant of the Nunes family. And then Tom, is the husband, Nuni's husband, and he has a tremendous passion in the history. He's also an ukulele historian, and he's also co-author, along with the late John King, of a book that you all might have heard of, another famous book in ukulele world called The Martin Ukulele, the little instrument that helped create a guitar giant. And so he will be joining us a little later as well. So the format and the discussions, we're going to talk primarily about Madeira today and try to dive in a little bit deeper. We don't claim to have all the answers. As a matter of fact, Jim, Mike, all of us on the panel jokingly, but truthfully, as it might be, say that we have a lot of theories and opinions, and there's a lot of speculation. But that being said, there are pockets of information that we know about for sure, that is confirmed, that is fact. But there's also a lot of speculation. So we hope to be able to just have a discussion, an academic discussion on this moving forward. In terms of the format for our panel, we're really looking at doing this more of a discussion. And so it's not like a lecture style by any means. We're just going to jump in. It might get a little bit bumpy along the way. We might interject a bit here and there. We might disagree, but I think that's part of the fun of what we're going to do here. And so kind of jumping in first, we're going to start off with a little bit about Madeira, because I know that when we talk about the ukulele, Madeira does come to mind, and people do reference Madeira, but it tends to be a little bit more shallow and just talking a little more about the origins of the ukulele and its roots to Madeira. But I think a big part of that discussion and understanding into the ukulele requires us to dig a little bit deeper. And typically things that are written in magazines or articles and so forth from any one of us, by nature of those articles and the limitations on the space and everything else, tend to be a little shorter intentionally because that's what the authors want. But now we have a platform by which we can talk a little bit more. This is going to be a series, so and that's why we're focusing primarily on Madeira today. And then as we move forward, we'll look at other aspects, maybe dive a little bit deeper into each of the three forefathers or founders of the ukulele, and then kind of expand out from there. So that being said, the first topic that we kind of wanted to jump into a little bit about Madeira was kind of set the framework of what Madeira, Maderian life was like prior to coming over, the Maderians immigrating over to Hawaii and actually other places throughout the world. I know I have some questions for a number of our panel members, and I think the appropriate person to give us the context of what Madeira might have been like in the 1800s would likely lean heavily on Jim and likely Mario as well, to be able to have some of those discussions. But maybe I'll turn this over a little bit to Jim, if you could give us a little bit of a framework on the research that you've done with regards to Madeira and what life might have been like prior to those early ships coming to Hawaii.
Sure. I was always curious as to why my ancestors left Madeira in the first place and traveled 4,000 miles to a place that they'd never been to before and were likely never to go back to Madeira again. Portugal was a troubled country in the 19th century, which started with the Napoleonic Wars. The French invaded mainland Portugal. The royal family, the royal Portuguese family, fled to Brazil for more than a decade and were technically ruling Portugal from one of their major colonies. Madeira itself was occupied by the British for 7 years during that period. And then afterwards, Portugal was involved in essentially a series of civil wars between liberals and monarchists that didn't end until 1851. So the country was not in great shape. On Madeira, there was an overpopulation problem, which led to a lot of emigration in the 1830s and the 1840s. And between 1840 and 1850, the estimate was that as many as 40 or 50,000 people left the island, many of them illegally because you had to have a passport to leave. There was a major famine in 1847, and that was followed by a fungus and then an aphid infestation that devastated the vineyards, which were the main driver of the economy in the 1850s and the 1870s. There was a cholera epidemic in 1856 that killed several thousand people. So to me, that gave me a better sense of why my family decided to leave Funchal and emigrate to Hawaii. There were lots of other Maderians who emigrated to what's now the country of Guyana. There's also Maderians in South Africa. There's a Maderian diaspora, and the evidence shows that the forerunner of the ukulele, the machete, was taken with them to all these other places. There's evidence that it was a popular instrument in Guyana, but Hawaii, for a variety of reasons, is the place that it became wildly popular and became quickly, in the matter of a decade, became known as the ukulele.
That's so fascinating. You know, as I was doing a little bit of, kind of reading and research on this too, prior to actually getting over to Madeira, I had so many questions about the ukulele. I still have so many questions about the ukulele and the origins. But having gone there and then having met Mario and having met so many others, and being able to see the landscape, see what the place is like, see what the role of music, for example, in that culture, really helped to explain things from a different perspective for me. In ukulele, I didn't know what I was going to see or what to expect, when I had gone there. Um, but and I, you read about how steep or how mountainous the area is. It's a volcanic island. There's so many things that are fascinating to me because there's a ton of parallels with Hawaii. Madeira has so many parallels in its history. Um, I mean, as you mentioned, well, maybe not on the wine side, but even sugarcane as a main, source, economic driver. Twice, I think, on two separate occasions, before and after the vineyards and some of the disease that was ravaging the vineyards there. I thought, wow, there seems to be a lot of things that were happening there that were in similar fashion happening here at a much later time. So when I got there, there, one of the things that immediately stood out, you can't help but notice how mountainous it was there. Mario, I remember when we first met up and you took me up to your shop. And Mario, you live in Funchal, right?
Yes.
Right, and we have some steep mountains here, right?
Yeah.
Mike lives up from my showroom. It's about 10 minutes away, 5 minutes or so. It's really close, but he lives up on the mountain side. Now, when I say mountain, it's a leisurely incline. There's a few windy roads, but it's a leisurely incline. We'll go to Mario's house. If you drive stick shift on that island, you're in trouble because Mario, I could swear that we were in an incline. I felt like I was on a roller coaster. I was ready to drop as we were heading up to your place. But some of the topography there, tell us a little bit about what the island topography is like, so we can, for the viewers, we can get an idea of what Funchal is like, what the little towns are like. Share with us a little bit about your home island there.
Yes, it's the as you said, it has it's cliffs, mountains and cliffs, and we managed to build our houses, our city and cities here in Madeira. So it's a very very inclined orography. So. More like the salt thieves, okay, thieves, and so it's here where we live. So we can, in maybe 100 meters long, we can go up about 60 meters. So just to visualize the angles of some places, and we live here, so we have Funchal is a very small city. It has it was built in a bay in Funchal as Mexico. It was the first city, the first place the discoverers arrived here in Madeira. It's more like Funchal, a bit smaller. And we have some villages up the mountain, down the valley. Corral das Freiras is a very known place. It's down. It's built down the valley, the valley, and it's closed by the mountains. It's literally closed by the mountain. So
one of the things go ahead.
The access to there, it's only by a tunnel hole in the mountain. There is an ancient road, but very dangerous too.
I remember, Mario, when we were driving out to that small town. Was it Porto
Moniz up north, the north side of the island. So
yeah, on the other side of the island. I remember when we were driving out there, I took notice because that road, first of all, as we went from these small towns to towns, there are a whole labyrinth of tunnels, right? Because cars
Yes,
are
no,
getting around the
yeah,
island. So there are
mhm,
tunnels everywhere because of these steep mountainous areas. But it
yes,
it, it caused me to reflect a bit because obviously those tunnels are more modern times. So from
yes,
in
yes. The,
before, for people to go from town to town, and probably a lot of those towns were not even in existence. They probably showed up at a much later time because of access as a result of these tunnels.
mhm,
But getting from place to place must have been
mhm.
quite challenging.
But,
And I
but
remember driving alongside the ocean as we went. There were a few roads that were almost etched into the side of the mountain, where the car could
yes,
just, or a cart could
mhm,
just barely pass, and it was only one cart. It was not a two-way access, and those roads were closed. I believe that you said, right?
yes, yes. Now they
Walking
are
traffic can
closed.
go through there now, right?
Yes, just a small courses of that road are open, little ones.
Mhm.
Uh, um, but you saw the new tunnels, so that they have more or less 20 years. No,
Mhm.
no more than that. But we have here in Madeira. It accustomed to build the tunnels because everyone said Madeira is full of water, but it's not that true. The north side of the island is full of water, but
Mhm.
we have to found a way to bring the water to the for the south,
Mhm.
and there was built the levadas, the tunnels to bring the water, and we have and the streets to go to south, northwest, and east. M- Most of them was carved in the rock
Mhm.
to pass, and just one car, and they were. There are some freaky places too.
And John, that's one of the similarities between Madeira and Hawaii, in that both have those geographies where the water is on essentially the windward side, and so elaborate irrigation systems had to be built in order to sustain the agriculture, which in Madeira was originally sugar.
Mhm.
The coat of arms of the city of Funchal are
Mhm.
sugar loaves. There's
Yes,
Mhm.
5 sugar loaves, which
five.
is based on the fact that Madeira was the place that showed the world what commercial sugar production looked like. That
Mhm.
was then
Yes.
exported to Brazil and to other parts of the world.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Yes.
Sean, this is Kimo. Can I get in a quick comment?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I would like to ask Jim and Mario, uh, uh, when you guys have some time, is to share with us recordings, preferably if you could find them, of Maderian music as it relates to ukulele in the 1870s time frame. And the reason for that is one of the things we really enjoy that Sean does is whenever he comes across a vintage ukulele that's playable, we try and play it. But as we are modern ukulele players, what we do when we play these vintage instruments is we infuse our own manao and how to play ukulele, which has nothing to do probably with the ukulele we're playing. As a player, I can tell from the size, especially the small size of some of these instruments, that the playing style was very different than what we or the way we play here in Hawaii and even in the mainland today. So I think the things that are being said about Madeira are really wonderful things, and I would love to have some recordings of the time so we can try and replicate the feeling that comes out of that music uh, on instruments that come out of that era. And I think and I think that a lot of the things that we're talking about are going to be reflected in the music that was being played at the time.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Wonderful. I
there
see. Go ahead. Go ahead, Jim.
there's a musician slash scholar in mainland Portugal, Manuel Moraes, who has done a lot of uh, eye-opening research on 19th century Madeiran machete repertoire and has unearthed several method books, well, at least a couple of method books that were created by Madeiran teachers, apparently for British tourist pupils. And those method books give us real insight into the more sophisticated kind of repertoire that was popular and was performed in concert in Funchal in the 1840s, 1850s, 1860s. I don't know, and Samantha Muir in England
Uh-huh.
is getting her PhD in ukulele performance, is, I believe, recording an album of that 19th century Maderian machete repertoire, which is essentially, it's dance music. It's polkas and gavots and waltzes and so on. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd love to
Yes.
learn about that because as we share the history and as we share our manao about woods, for example, it would be wonderful to share equally share manao about how about sound and not sound from today, but sound at the time that was being played on the ukulele, because we can certainly come up with how the ukulele affected the sound, I should say, of Hawaiian music and how it got reflected from the Hawaiian culture. But to have equal input from the Maderian standpoint would be really wonderful. So I'd appreciate knowing of whatever contact information you could share, Jim, because I'd love to pursue that.
So would I.
Cool. Okay, we'll do
Yes,
it.
it's true from the mainland. Professor Manuel Moraes, he has a work on the machete. He has a quintet. I don't know. I don't recall the rest of the name, which played music for machete and vihuela and alaúd lute some years ago. But here in Madeira, I will send you a YouTube link, a video.
As we continue down this road, Shawn, and continue to play these ukes, what we'll do is play as best we can the music that was being played at the time. Way back in the day. I think that would be fascinating.
Yes, I will share a link from YouTube.
Great.
It's a link from YouTube. It's Trios Argo. It's a group that I have with the two Robertos, Muniz and Moritz, and we only work the music you are saying,
Great.
polkas, dances. I just found one video in YouTube, so the one was from more than 5 years ago. What is this one is played with an orchestra, mandolin orchestra, small mandolin orchestra in their anniversary. So sometimes we unite and play these songs, but it's written songs from the 18th century, 18th century.
I'm excited about sharing that music with with people here in Hawaii and even people internationally, because in 1879,
Yes,
when those
19th
guys
century.
got here, that's exactly what they did. Was they shared their music and the instrument with the Hawaiian people here, and everybody loved it. So it would be wonderful, I think, to try and recreate that as best we can.
Yes, this music was played in saloons, in parties,
See,
in the high
just like
society.
Hawaiian music. Yeah,
Yes,
that'd be cool.
and there is the other side, the popular one. It's a bit different, but that is only passed to generation by year by talking. This one is written, the one I share with you.
Got it. Got it. Okay, thank you.
I also
Okay.
see another face down here that Mr. Tom Walsh has joined us as well. We did a little introduction a little bit earlier. Welcome, Tom.
Thank
Nice
you.
to see
It's great to see everybody. Sorry I wasn't able to be here for the whole thing, but I'm glad that it's to see that it was being recorded. I hope I get to watch the rest of it.
Oh no, this is great. This is great. And I see a wall
A
of
little couple
wonder
high
behind
left,
you.
yeah.
Yes. Oh, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. So we were discussing a little bit about Madeira, the topography, the history, the culture of music, and so forth. One of the things that I noticed while we were there, while I was there, was just the amazing, wonderful woodworking that so many people in Madeira were doing. Clearly, we see this craft on early ukuleles, but we also see them on the parent instruments. I have two of the parent instruments here. Both of these are from Madeira. These are Maderian instruments. The Maderian rajao, the 5-string, or is it pronounced rajao, Mario?
Sorry, I was looking for music. Can you repeat?
The Maderian rajao and Maderian machete, right?
Yes.
And
yes.
so we'll dive into a little bit more about some construction techniques, some of the woods and so forth. But before we get into that, I was wondering, because I know I've certainly read Jim and John King's book, and also Tom and John King's book on Martin ukuleles as well as some other things. But the woodworking, is frequently referenced, and I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, Jim, but the Portuguese term for woodworking that was on the manifest and so forth when Nunes, Diaz, and Santu came was, what was the term?
Well, they were
Trebladores, or?
Because they were shipped over as plantation labor, they were identified as laborers. But professionally, all three were marceneiros. They were cabinet makers. And Mario, you'll have to correct my pronunciation.
No, carpinteiros, merceneiros. Sorry, merceneiros.
Marceneiro.
Yes. The woodwork is more like a cabinet maker. It's a bit more refined. We use that word for refined woodwork. So cabinet makers, it's acceptable.
So Mario, on that note, in Madeira, for example, someone with a title or calling of cabinet maker clearly makes cabinets. But what are some things or some examples that someone with that type of skill set might be making in Madeira prior, to coming over? Do they make a whole variety of things in woodworking, or specifically cabinetry? Because it seems as though there's cabinetry, there's instruments, there might be other things that are also being made from these skilled woodworkers.
Yes. I sincerely, I don't know. So they share the technology, the they share the wood together. So the cabinet maker here, the marceneiro, so as he is a refined work, so he has a lot of precision aside from other types of woodworkers who work on construction and timber work on timber. So I don't know if was the main profession of them, the instruments builders, so that they must live with other profession. So I know one Diabinho, so just this name, I think is Antero Quintal Jr. I don't know. I may be crossing their names. Went to Lisbon, and there makes his name on building instruments. We have one and another very good builders, Otaviano João Nunes, Antero Quintal Jr., and Cambé, the uncle. So it's a more older one, and another more one, two, or three. So, but we are a small place to 10 people's building instruments was more than enough for us. So they must earn their money doing other things, of course.
Part of the woodworking tradition in Madeira are barrel makers, coopers, or panuelos, I think.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
My great-great-grandfather's father, João, was a tanuero. He was a barrel maker. And
Yes.
because wine was the central pillar of the Madeiran economy, barrel making was an important and respected skill.
Yes.
I can't speak for all Madeiran marceneiro, but when, for example, my great-great-grandfather opened up his first shop, his first loja in Honolulu, it was a furniture and guitar shop. He didn't do just one thing. And there are elaborately inlaid tables that have been attributed to Manuel Nunes and José do Espírito Santo. There's a story in one of the Honolulu papers about an elaborately inlaid photo album that Manuel Nunes had made and had on display in his shop. So there's and I have not found any documentary evidence that Dias Nunes or Santu were identified as instrument makers, violeiros, back in Funchal. So, yes. And there's nothing in the passport applications or anything else that would identify them, that does identify them that way. So they, as Mario says, Madeira and Funchal are small places, and it makes sense that you would not specialize in one particular area.
Yes. So the wood, the tanueiros, the barrel builders. So just to demonstrate the importance, the wine was in Funchal, we have a street in the middle of Funchal with the name Tanueiros. So it was their place, the place that where they trade and work on barrels, and it's near the port. So it's a very important, was very important for our economy too.
Very, very fascinating. I have a question on that. It's a good segue into our next topic as we're heading into discussing, the woods that are used on some of the parent instruments, the woods are available in Madeira, and so forth. I remember you taking me over to, or actually, meeting up with Carlos Jorge.
Yes.
And a remarkable luthier there as well.
Mm-hmm.
And he was also very familiar with many of the woods that are available and sourced locally, but also woods that were passing through because Madeira was on the trade route. To go through to and from various parts of the world. I've always wondered a little bit, and I know that Mike and I have had discussions on this as well, because when we talk about ukuleles, we frequently talk about Hawaiian koa or koa and spruce combinations. Also historically at a bit later time, not the earliest builds, but we also talk about Martin ukuleles, the use of mahogany and other woods, and even to this day with the contemporary luthiers, there are all sorts of magnificent woods that are being utilized, at least on the ukulele. Woods that have been made quite popular as a result of use on the guitar, and has then since, I should say, made its way over into the world of ukulele and ukulele construction.
Yes.
And so can you share with us a little bit about some of the woods, the Maderian woods that are only locally found there in Madeira? I think a couple of them I remember Carlos Jorge mentioning to me was Viñático. I think Viñático was one.
Yes, Viñático.
Yeah?
So Viñático and Til. They make Til. Yes, they are from the Laurasia family trees. So the name which was given the name of our florist, Laurisilva. Laurasia, from there were a lot. So the til is a very appreciated wood to make the instruments. So if you have one instrument from Madeira to 1870 or something, you will see the dark wood is still most of them.
Kind of like this one.
Yes.
I couldn't tell if this was Brazilian or Til, but it definitely has some, the dark.
Yes, it's very dark. It's difficult to see the veins of the wood. It's a uniform color.
Is this in the family of like a rosewood?
No.
No. In English, they're members of the laurel family.
Yes, the laurel family. No, it's not rosewood. It's different. The grain is more close than rosewood. It's more tight than rosewood. It's very hard. It has a very bad smell to work with. That one. The Viñático is a little bit lighter in color.
I think I have Viñático on this one here. The Machintinho that Carlos Jorge made for me.
Yeah, but it's recent.
One.
Yes, yeah? It's younger. Viñático. Viñático is a bit more darker, and we can see.
Yeah.
We can see the veins of the wood, the rings of the wood as well too. It's more to see one and another. We can maybe they are different woods, but and different colors. Mahogany on your side and vignatico on the other. You will see only by your eyes the difference is it's only the color. So we see the design, the wood design, the wood rings too. And one wood that we use a lot is bushu, boxwood, a French one. So they used to, so the pins, the bridge pins, the saddles, neck saddles, and bridge saddles, it's made of that wood. It's a yellowish, very dense wood, very dark.
So Mario, is this a wood that was used both historically as well as today? Builders use this wood today as well?
Yes, it's very, very
appreciated.
Yes, I can. So bushes is a small tree. Let me put something. It's a bit.
It's a smaller tree.
Yeah, smaller. Very, very dense wood, and it's used when we produce historical instruments. We use that wood for the saddles and pins, and some decoration too. Vignatico, til. It's the main woods. We have cherry from, but it's not how I said. It's not as it not only exists in Madeira. Cherry wood exists in other things, Nogueira too, and that's it. The rest of the woods come from the trade, the wine, sugar, and back the English folk.
How about the soundboard woods, Mario? You know,
soundboard
forests, right? And these are more firs or spruces, or are they bringing those from Europe?
Yes,
from Europe.
Spruce. Yes, the better instruments they were made in spruce. The other ones was made in pine, good pine, good pine, Swedish white pine, something like that.
These soundboard materials weren't indigenous to Madeira. They had to be brought
right. Those soundboard materials are brought in, right?
Yes, the soundboards, yes.
Very consistent in all your examples.
Yes, because it is already settled that a good soundboard is from spruce. So even today.
Right. Well, I'm totally for that. A soundboard because we use soundboard material, and I can see it historically. That,
yes.
It's a softer of a hardwood like a spruce or.
It's very elastic and as the ideal properties for even a bigger instrument, a bass guitar, as I have one acoustic, and a smaller one like a machete. It's the best wood to work with and project the sound.
I have a question about, because in the ukulele world, we are very familiar with the two parent instruments, as it might be, right? The rajao, the Maderian rajao, and the Maderian machete.
Yes.
But when I visited there, and there were all of these other instruments. I know this was one, being the machetino, right?
Yes.
The smaller size than the machete. And then there was another instrument that you were making actually at that time. I believe you called it viola de aram.
Yes, it's like a steel string guitars.
And how many strings is that?
10. 5
That's a
double.
10 string.
10 string, 5 double strings.
5 double. So 5 courses.
5 courses, exactly.
And that the viola de aram, is that similar to the viola de terra from the Azores, or a different number of strings?
Yes, they have a different number of strings. They have 12, I think.
I think I had
12,
one that's why viola de terra from Saint Miguel, and I think it had 12
yes,
strings.
12 strings. In Açores, they have two models of the guitar. So in Portugal, there is a family of the violas de ram, steel string guitars. So we have it in Madeira, Açores as two, Portugal more, so north and center more four models of the guitar, and from Madeira, so there is one in Brazil, more like the same happen to like the ukulele. So the immigrants brought our viola Maderians. I don't know. Someone say it was the Maderian viola. Others from the mainland. And they still use it, and they have a guitar, five string guitars with different tunings, and one of the tunings is from Madeira, the other is from Brazil, new one. So it's a huge family of instruments. It's a size like a parlor guitar, a bit smaller, and that's it. We use that guitar is used more in popular music, street popular music, than in the saloons. They don't use this guitar. They use the viola.
Yeah,
it's like a Spanish guitar.
Spanish guitar. The
Yeah,
reason I ask is because the going back to Kimo's question earlier about music that was happening earlier at the time, one of the things that I came to realize from learning, talking to Tom and talking to Jim and others, was that when I got into historic ukuleles, I was so focused on the ukuleles, but that I lost sight of the reality, the fact that those instruments, sure, they were probably played on their own, but they were likely also played in ensemble with other instruments as well. And so even for the ukulele, we know that the guitar was here, the banjo was here during that time, the violin was also in Hawaii, so there were also, a number of different instruments. And so it made me think about how these two instruments, or why these two instruments made its way and remained in popularity to create what we now know as the ukulele, and why maybe some of the other Maderian instruments that likely came over too, but for one reason or another didn't have as much of a following or an interest, or for whatever it might be, the perfect storms came to be that those instruments didn't really take hold or not really discussed. Jim, are you aware of any references to any of the other Maderian instruments that maybe showed up in Hawaii?
No, go ahead, Mario.
No,
I have not seen any other references. I think, and this is just a guess on my part, but if you're picking between machete, which has 4 strings, or a viola de ram, which has 5 courses of 5 double courses, a 4-string machete is a lot easier to keep in tune than anything else that it has double courses. I think that's one reason why the taro patch, which Martin made and other manufacturers made, was not particularly popular, because you had twice as many strings to try to keep in tune. But I think that the size of the taro patch, or the size, which I think is, essentially the size of the rajao, you do see photos of vintage photos from Hawaii, from the 90s and the turn of the century, where people have a taro patch, a rajao, with 4 strings. They just leave off the 4th string because, again, it's less tuning. It's a larger instrument. The fingerboard is larger. It makes it easier to play. And so I think there's not an invention, so to speak. It's just that, I don't want to mess around. I mean, particularly if you're playing something with gut strings, which is going to go out of tune in the humidity anyway. Why would you bother with all those strings? Just something with 4 strings that's simple, that's easy to tune and easy to play.
That's a good point.
Yes.
That's functionality. What's your thoughts on that too, Tom, with the research that you've done on the Martin taro patches and so forth?
Yeah, no, I completely agree with Jim, and not even just that having 1 less string makes it easier, but having the 2 instruments tuned the same so that you can pick, you don't have to learn 2 sets of chords, a different set of chords to play on this 5-string instrument than you would on this 4-string instrument. It just makes it a much simpler thing. You can pick up either one and play the same thing as long as you know a set of chords. That's why I think,
touch on that too, because I think that's kind of interesting. It's my opinion that the love of the ukulele is simply because it's so simple. We always described ukulele as a delightful diminutive instrument coming from the islands. And I think that says it in a nutshell, because 4 strings is affordable, something you can carry around, something that's easier to play. Now, as a luthier, I started with guitar because that was my first love. But from Hawaii and getting introduced to the ukulele, it was the easy transition, because now all of a sudden it's just less wood to work with, and it can do all the things that a big instrument can do. And as the players like Kimo and Randy who play it realize that, hey, this is pretty good. I can kind of improve quickly without 6 strings and a lot of frets to play with. So I think a large part of that, with the introduction of the rajao or the machete into Hawaii, it kind of morphed into something just easier for the local guys to play, and delightful sound, and everybody could pick it up without costing an arm and a leg.
Mike, I'm curious, as a builder, because the ukulele is smaller, it means that the size of the wood that you need to build them is also smaller, and you can use lumber that you couldn't build a guitar out of, but you could build something smaller like a ukulele. Do you think that could that have possibly been a factor as well?
Well, for me, I believe economics is always driven. I mean, what you create is economically driven a lot, and it's just like why the ukulele now is all hard and core. I mean, when you describe an ukulele, especially a Hawaiian ukulele, you expect it to be all core. Yet, if you were luthier based and you were a builder, core would be not a soundboard of choice. It would be spruce or some sort of harder softwood, pines, cedars, redwoods even. So again, Martin tried that, but they couldn't get koa because they had to bring it in. They went with what they had and what was musically important at the time, which was mahogany. Great mellow sound. And to this day, the difference between a Martin and an older all-cool ukulele is the sound is totally different. I mean, it's a little more mellow. It's a nice thing. And Martin was I guess they probably introduced soundboards were spruce originally, but that didn't go because that's not what the people expected. So again, economy always drives, you know, the masses.
One of the things about what we're talking about now that impacts playing and players is that one of the really significant advantages of ukulele is that it's easy to learn to play. So very easily, a beginner, for example, can get into the process very simply of making and enjoying music because it's a lot easy. It's very easy on the ukulele, easy to the point where ukulele more and more now is being embraced by music therapists as a means of them practicing their trade because of its simplicity, because it's easy to play, and a lot of times the reason why we as listeners enjoy just listening to the ukulele is that you can produce very beautiful sounds without having to spend hours and weeks and months doing exercises. I mean, just in a few minutes you can get a beginner willing to play. So this idea of what I will call simplicity in the ukulele applies to playing and players a lot.
Absolutely. I think there's a beautiful kind of connection, certainly between the musician and the instrument. But in similar fashion, there's also this wonderful connection between the builder and this instrument. You can see the personalities of the builders. I know dealing in custom ukuleles as well as these historical ones, you can see the personalities, and I can get an idea, even though I never met these people, of their work ethic, their personality in terms of their style, a little more flashier, a little more reserved. There are things that show up. I think one of the things that Jim had pointed out to me, and I have it here as a reference, because one of the things that we were talking about is if there's no reference that any of these, Nunes, Diaz, or Santu were builders prior to coming over, then how could they do something like this right from the beginning? The very earliest stages, it's just remarkable to look at the amount of work that is done on something.
Yeah, Shawn and I were discussing this earlier because if you describe the Madeiran people who came over, like the trio, as skilled woodworkers, this definitely is a high level of skill. An instrument maker just doesn't pick up and rope binding. You can't order it from Sears and bring it over. It doesn't work that way. So the guys who did this, when they came over as skilled craftsmen, they were skilled because I know just from experience, the rope binding is a special thing. It's a technique, and you have to know how to put it together, and then combine it with the purfling patterns that he has done in here. It shows a high level of skill, even to understand the fretwork and the whole thing on how to space out your scale. That's another skill that you don't just pick up and say, I think I'm going to try this because I'm a woodcraft person, and then come up with it. And the bending of the wood. I mean, there's no heat benders.
The taper,
yep,
even that comes across this way. There's so many unique features on this, but at the same time, so much skill that goes in. This is, for the viewers at least, this is one of this is a Hawaiian Kingdom period instrument from Santu that was made likely around 1886 with a koa back and sides and a spruce top here. But if we can return a little bit back to Madeira, talking about construction techniques, because we see some application clearly that's happening here with apparent instruments as well. Maybe Mike can talk a little bit about this from the builder's perspective, and Mario, but the use of the Spanish construction, and the approach. Can you explain to the the viewers and so forth what exactly Spanish construction is?
Spanish construction simply is the actual sides, the body of the instrument is actually slotted into the neck, and it's not a two-piece. A lot of modern constructions is the body is made separate in a mold and the neck is made separate, and they're joined together by various means. It can be as simple as a bolt-on or a couple screws, a dowel, a spline, a mortise joint, a dovetail joint, but just various things. So you can take the body, treat it separately, take the neck, treat it separately, and then join it together as it's finished. It makes binding application a lot easier because you have a separate instrument that you could take your router or your jig device and go right around the whole thing, which the Maderians couldn't do because they didn't have routers, I'm sure. So it would be all by hand. And the tricky thing about construction on binding on a Spanish style a neck is that for this all has to be hand done. The router can't go past the heel. It just doesn't reach. The base gets in the way. So it's always here, here, and at the neck where you have to do it by hand, and then figure out a way how are you going to continue the rope binding or their binding to go around. I mean, you have to channel this out by hand. So the work in Spanish would be a lot more meticulous, but I guess that's the way things were done guitar-wise.
So historically, I think what you're pointing out, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, Mike. So we have a neck for Spanish construction, right? We have a neck, and then the sides go into that neck.
Yes.
And then the top goes on, right?
Yes.
And then the back goes on.
Then the back. Well, yeah, the ribs are in.
Right.
And then the back.
And then the back goes on.
Yes.
And so when you're talking about using jigs and so forth, obviously you're talking about a Spanish construction in modern day times where people will have routers, but they still need to work this section by hand.
Just because mechanical cannot reach.
Right, mechanically you can't reach. So if we look at the parent instruments here, and we can see that parallel in traditions that have also come over with Spanish construction on these instruments as well. Is that correct?
Yeah, well, that's my assumption, because I can't tell by looking, but I don't see any, mechanical means of putting this together.
Maybe Mario, do you have some insights? Because I know you've done restoration on some of the historical Maderian instruments.
Yes, the historical instruments, they heritage the Spanish method of construction. First, you do the silhouette. Okay. First, there are two approaches. They do the silhouette, the neck in the ribs, and there is another one. You start with the neck and the soundboard. So the soundboard is the first thing you work on the instrument. Is the first part is being ready on the instrument, and next they put the ribs into the neck slots, and it is the same. And next they finish with the back.
Can you share with us, Mario, your understanding of some, not only the techniques, but for example, some of the tools that might have been available or used to bend these sides early on, at least in ukulele history, and some of the things that we know about ukulele here, there are various techniques to be able to use to bend the sides, such as a pipe, heating the pipe and bending that over. Is that a tradition that was consistent in Madeira with regards to bending sides?
Yes, to a pipe or some metal sheet bends around it like a small house, but rounded, like the roof of the house rounded, and with heat, so that they they could use gas, a lamp maybe, because for the small instruments, it it can reach the ideal temperature, but they could use gas, and it's a compromise with water and moisture and steam to reach the point when you can bend the sides of the instrument. Back on the days, I have one piece of that I like that. It's a metal bend to bend the wood. I ask a friend of mine to do it. For small things, for purflings, I use that with a lamp. It's enough. I don't use the electric one. It's faster to work with the flame. And I think is what they used to in the ancient days. It's something like that.
Well, I think that the modern day construction, as you mentioned, various ways to join the neck, finish the neck and the body separately, join them. All kinds of things are happening to the ukulele nowadays. Different approaches to building the instruments and so forth. But with regards to so these are the parent instruments, and then the one that we just showed you was an early example of an ukulele here. When we see the body changing, from the parent instruments, the depth changing, all kinds of things are changing. But one thing that Mike and I were really interested about, because we have access to these historical pieces, was to see whether the inside was changing.
Right.
And what I found interesting, and maybe it's best said, if it isn't broke, don't fix it, right? Because everything on the inside of these early ukuleles looks identical to the bridge, the bracing patterns or lack thereof of the parent instruments, which is expected because these people came over and had this understanding. But I thought that that was very interesting, because their approach, which kind of ties back into whether or not they build instruments, or at least were known to build instruments prior to coming over, is that they knew enough not to brace, not to fan brace, not to X brace, not to lattice brace or anything of that sort. The soundboards. But
Yes.
Conversely, we have a guitar giant, and Tom can speak to this, but that has been around for almost 100 years. By the time they got into ukuleles, 1907 when they did that first batch of 6, and then 1917 when they rolled everything out. But Martin, heavily braced, at least, right, so to speak, that those first instruments. But they also came from a very different place, the background of building guitars. And so I find it really interesting to see two very different approaches into early construction of the ukuleles from a guitar giant like Martin, but at the same time from these early builders that are paralleling the historical instruments. From what you have seen, or from what we've seen, I should say, there's no bridge patch on the underside of this, which we would at least minimally expect a bridge patch. None. There's no bracing except for what we find, just 2 transverse braces here, right? One above and below for the sound hole, so it doesn't collapse, just one here and one here. And that seems to be consistent, because Kamaka learned from Manuel Nunez and others, right? That seems to be consistent for quite some time, at least the Hawaii-made ukuleles. Tom, I know you have a bunch of ukuleles and you love this stuff and you're researching them too. In terms of bracing and so forth, what have you found out on some of these earlier pieces?
Well, I don't know. I agree with you that they mostly follow a very, similar pattern. even comparing the, Madeiran instruments to the Hawaiian instruments, I don't think there's any doubt that the earliest Hawaiian makers, even if they're not didn't advertise in Madeira as making instruments, they definitely had experience. You can't just go and make this instrument without having some knowledge, So
Right.
Yes.
I maybe they weren't in the business there, but they certainly must have at least apprenticed or worked with people that made instruments, because it's just, there are just too many similarities for it to be a coincidence or a lucky guess or anything like that. About the Martin thing, even though I talked about this in my book, but the only mention of them being heavily braced or anything like that is really just been passed down word of mouth. It's not something that is in their records, and they have a lot of records and keep a lot of detailed books there. I take it with a little bit of a grain of salt that was the issue. I think the main issue with their original 6 instruments that they made in 1907 was they were too expensive to make them practical to ship them to Hawaii, and when there were people making them in Hawaii who could make them much more reasonably priced. So I don't know. I would love for one of those original 6 Martin ukuleles to turn up somewhere so that we could actually answer these questions and see if it was the spruce top or the guitar-like bracing, or if that's just sort of ideas that came up in retrospect.
So, if we talk about this other parent instrument here, the rajao has a similar scale length to like a tenor ukulele, right? We would expect, at least I'm not a builder, but I would expect that these simpler instruments, the smaller size ones, the need for bracing is not really great because of the scale length being shorter, the string tension being lower, a whole number of factors. And also the fact that they're using gut strings, which have a whole lot less tension than other strings. When we look at something like this that has a longer scale length, not by much, but can also, but by modern day standards, a scale length like this now in the tenor size ukulele has all kinds of fascinating bracing. I mean, we go talk to Manny Hallican and look at his tenor ukuleles, and we get all kinds of bracing going on with Manny. But and fan bracing, lattice bracing, we see all kinds of things showing up. What's your thoughts about when or why did all of this bracing start showing up on the tenor sized ukulele, and at what time period do you think this was happening? Because it's not on the earlier instruments.
I guess I can speak for myself, but then I would thank Martin especially then, because when I started, there wasn't very much information on how to. There's a couple books at most, Irving Sloan being on guitar, and that's about it. But Martin, the history of Martin, in the back of the little book, they had a glossary, and actually they publish dimensions of what they produced in the baritone, tenor, concert, and standard ukulele. And they're the only publication that I could find that actually gave dimension for the upper bout, the waist, the lower bout, body size, height of sides, height of the ribs. I mean, important stuff, fret width at the nut. And with that, I think you are comfortable that you can follow this and come out with an ukulele that should be an ukulele size. But as far as bracings, I think it's natural most for a builder to what we call in a way fut around. Yeah, you want to always fool around with what you're trying to do, because no matter what you make and how it sounds, because my favorite saying is, once you complete it and you play it, the ukulele no lie. I mean, what you hear is what you get. And any builder that I know figures, oh, this sounds good. What if I tweak it another way? Could it sound better? You may take notes and draw stuff, but you always have that thing that this is never it. There's something that maybe would be better. That morphs into all kinds of designs, and I guess you look back historically and you think, oh, this lattice stuff, Greg Smallman started this stuff on guitars, and my gosh, it sounds good and it works. Okay, so let me try that. Or there's this nut Michael Kasha with Richard Schneider running around, and he's doing the Kasha bracing, asymmetrical. Okay, let's try that. And then lately with Taylor and Andy, who comes up with the Sonic V, it's like, oh, if Taylor can design a whole new arm featuring Sonic Vs, maybe there's something about a Sonic V. And I guess it's just never ending and you keep trying. But if you go back historically, and especially for the small guys, the standards and small instruments, you're not going to find bracing, even in the newer builds, because it's such a small instrument. There's just no need for that. Yeah, a patch would be nice to keep the strings in there, and that happens a lot. But the way you look at it, it's, I guess the easiest thing is to look at a ukulele back. That has not changed for at least 150 years. It's got the horizontal ladder bracing, maybe 3 of them on the back, and then that's what it is. But if you look at new modern stuff, you'll see that, okay, they've even attacked that. You know, they have asymmetrical bracing going. I have an archer's bow. There's all kind. I think Canilea now has this bracing that looks like it looks like bridge construction because it's all trussed out to lose weight. There's holes everywhere in the bracing to lose weight. So like I say, it's a never-ending story. It just goes like that. I'm sure that from what the Nunez and the De Santo and Diaz came out with from the initial start to the ending part of their career as they pass on, their instruments also change. And a lot of it has to do with simple construction, meaning economics, of course, and then a better or faster way. But for a builder who is commercial, he always has to think of how efficient and how much, you know, because he has to get that out. For guys like myself who retired and have nothing better to do, we can go on forever because it doesn't affect us cost-wise, you know, because we're not selling it or not. Yeah, I mean, that's just what happens.
Well, I think you touched on something that's kind of interesting too, is the, the approach that builders are taking nowadays, and not only specific to ukuleles, but instrument makers worldwide, are considering the, factors that are, and environments that are not specific to their location. They are also building to account for various shifts in temperature or different parts, of the world, and how woods might react in more humid, arid areas, or colder areas. And so what's amazing to me is that these, I don't think, Nunez or Diaz or Santu had any intention of considering, oh, my instrument's going to be in, Europe someday. I need to consider that and build for that future possibility.
Right.
They were just building the instruments to play and enjoy for the locals that were either for locals that were living there or tourists that were passing through. But yet builders now do take some of that into consideration with regards to their approach to building and bracing patterns.
That's a good point. What I think that has affected me in the recent future on building is the interjection of the player's input to actual construction of an ukulele. I think for me, Kimo was and still is an important factor because he wants to play the ukulele and he can play it. But he also has these weird ideas as well that he would say, hey, how about trying a long neck? Why can't we have a 650 scale on a baritone? okay, let's try, or why does the tenor have to be at 17? Why can't we make it 18 or 16 and 3/4? I mean, it still fits the case.
90.
So all of a sudden now you're getting input from the guys you want to, the guys who actually play it. Yeah. I've taught ukulele since 1994 school-wise. And the amazing thing you'll always, that hits you right off is 90% of those who come to the class and want to build don't play. They just think that it's a fun thing to do. So you can get caught as a builder just making something that people appreciate, selling it, and then now you're stuck with the Big Mac. You got to make more of the same things because that's what they want, but we don't have access then to the player who says, hey, this is pretty cool, but it would be kind of nice if you had a metal plate here to tap on to make percussive noises or something strange. And I think that's the beauty of the ukulele. It's simple to make. You have so many players, and you have now so many musicians. I mean, guys who really play, and you get all that feedback. And then that's this whole Manao thing that we get to share, and we all just gain from it. But I like this because we owe it all to the guys who started it, and you got to look back at what they did, because these guys were no dummies. They were really skilled workers at what they did. Absolutely. And if we look back, I mean, it's amazing workmanship that went in, and we can learn a lot just from the past.
Absolutely.
I think.
Go ahead, Kim, go ahead.
I'd like to make an input from the standpoint of players. The reason why what we're doing now is so extremely important has to do with sharing with players. A player, especially a player who's been playing for a while, and when they play their ukulele, as long as the adrenaline isn't gushing, but when they play the ukulele, they can feel and hear the kinds of things that you guys are talking about in terms of a quality ukulele. So when a player plays to educate rather than to entertain, what that player does is to get out of the way of the instrument. It's the player getting out of the way of the instrument that the listener, even if it's the player himself, can hear what's right about the instrument. Because what they're hearing, they're not telling themselves, whoa, this instrument has this kind of bracing, or it has this kind of top. No, it's all a matter of subjectivity, in the ukulele. So the reason why we need to share this is when players play, if they play in a manner that attracts attention to them as a player, that's okay. But more often than not, or in addition to that, what players ought to do is play to the instrument, and the player should be a catalyst and not getting in the way of the instrument. And when the player is able to do that, then the ukulele gets out of the way of the music. And it's the music and participation in the music that causes people to feel good. So when we play, if people say, "Oh, you're a good player," that's okay. But what we're trying to get the person to do who's listening when we play right, when the instrument is made right, is the listener goes, "Oh, that's beautiful." The kinds of techniques that you guys are sharing have lasted centuries, and they still work together. And centuries is much longer than just one player who plays real well. especially if that player focuses totally on entertainment. So, so from the player's standpoint, I wanna tell you guys that I very much appreciate what you guys are sharing, because it makes me appreciate the instrument that much more. And when any player is able to appreciate the instrument in the way that you guys are talking about, the music comes out better.
That's wonderful. So on that note, we're going to wrap up a little bit in a little bit. But before we do so, we just want to let everyone that's watching know that we do plan to do some future sessions. We only focus primarily on Madeira today, but there will be other sessions that will be breaking down more about the history and looking at some of the instruments, maybe having Kimo play them if he's down here
It'd be nice.
on that time too.
I can do that.
Yeah, so we could explore these instruments and then dive in a bit deeper into the family with Tom and Nooni on the Nunez side, and certainly with Jim on the Diage side as well. But as we wrap this up, maybe we'll go down and just down the list here, and each of you can say your last closing remarks, anything that you wanted to tidy up for this particular session, or things that you're excited about as we move forward with this. Go ahead, Jim. Why don't you go first?
Well, this is kind of geeky, but I think a lot of the discussion from the maker's standpoint, from a historical standpoint, I would say that, for example, the changes in bracing that we've seen reflect a shift from mass-produced instruments that are being made by the thousands in Chicago, and the individual luthiers approach. Because in 1926, the National Association of Manufacturers, Music Manufacturers, or it wasn't exactly called that then, put together a committee, and they came up with standardized string lengths for a standard ukulele and a tenor and so on.
Yes.
If you look at the earliest ukuleles, it's very difficult to tell what a standard model was, because there's so much differentiation. And you particularly see this with Santu. I get the sense that Zay, hey, let's try that. I like that banjo peghead, so I'm going to make a rajao that's like a 5-string banjo with the 5th string halfway down the fingerboard, or I'm going to bind the bridge, which makes no sense to me personally. It looks really cool, but why you would spend that time doing that, I don't know. But I think so. A lot of the evolution of the building of ukulele and the modern developments that we've seen, I think represent in part a shift from mass-produced instruments and individuals like Mario and Mike, who are approaching it from a much more individual way and are willing to take suggestions from folks like Kimo about, let's have a long neck, or let's do this other thing that is unconventional.
Oh man, you're suggesting that there were several Kimos through the history of what?
I would love to know who Diage and Nunez and Santu were talking to, and who was coming into the shop, and who was, they're talking story, and they're, why don't you try this, or I'd like that, or I would have loved to set in on those conversations.
Oh yeah, that's great. Well, thanks for your input there, Jim. How about you, Mario? How about some last thoughts?
Yes, I just want to pick the words from your side colleague. I don't recall his name. Sorry. So about the building instruments, the size of them, a bit like Jim said too. So I tend to explore the relation between the musician and the construction of the instrument. So I make instruments for one, that I work one by one. a musician. That's my goal on making instruments, and to go to answer him for his questions about the instruments a bit more buzz here or there. The scale can be not stretched, but there is a standard, yes, but we can go further and or make it shorter. The sound box can be a little higher or smaller. If he's experienced and emotional musician, he can translate that in words, and me as makers can translate to the instrument, and that is a relation. I think ukulele, it's a reflection of that too. It's a popular instrument. It satisfies everyone in every place. So the call was soundboard. It's good to on and to go to pick the ukulele for you take him and play it in the beach, on a beach. I don't know if you know what I mean, but with a spruce soundboard, it's weaker, and it cannot happen. Okay, but it's that it's not a compromise. It's an open-minded related to the making instruments and build the relationship with the instrument and the person who plays it. It's
Well said. Well said. Well said from someone who both builds and plays.
yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing your thoughts.
Yes.
Tom, share something. Your thoughts on this session.
Well, as a person that neither builds nor plays very well, but or at least not an expert player, I certainly play and I enjoy it a great deal. But it's just
I don't play ukulele. I play bass.
Okay.
Okay.
Plays bass.
Just bass. Sorry, contrabass.
I just want to say I greatly enjoyed hearing the expert players and the instrument builders and everybody's opinion. So it's been a lot of fun, and I'm glad. I appreciate being asked to be involved. Sorry I missed the beginning, but nothing really else to say.
Oh, no,
Can I ask a favor of Tom?
Yeah.
And Tom, I've never met you before. I'd appreciate knowing just a little bit, perhaps biographically, about you and your relationship with ukulele.
Okay. I was given an ukulele as a present on her birthday back around 1990, 1989, something like that, and just went out and got a book, started to learn to play a little bit, really enjoyed it, had a few friends who thought, oh, that's really neat, and picked up ukuleles also, and soon we met up with other people in the Northeast United States, particularly one Paul Cyphers, who was interested in putting together the Ukulele Hall of Fame Museum. And so it was something that we worked on, and we actually put on a number of ukulele expos in the Northeast, and mostly this was in the late 90s, early 2000s. At the very first ukulele expo in 1996, I met my wife, Noonie, who's the great-granddaughter of Manuel Nunes. She had come out from Seattle for the first ukulele expo, and we met there and communicated afterwards, and then she eventually moved out from Seattle, and we were married the next year. So she has been involved also in the Ukulele Hall of Fame, which was really a bigger thing when we were putting on the expos in the early 2000s. And then, I don't know, as everybody wound up getting more involved in their jobs, that sort of slipped away a little bit. And it would be something that we still dream of, having some sort of a space or an actual physical building where you know, I've collected instruments and records and music books, ukulele methods. I have, you know, an extensive collection of materials and done a lot of research. And then eventually, after meeting John King, who also became involved in the museum, we got together and wrote the book about Martin ukuleles. So that was published back in 2013, a little bit after Jim's book came out, I guess. And I don't know, I guess that's about it.
Well, thanks. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, that's wonderful. How about you, Mike?
Well, like, sure, I'd like to thank all of you for the invitation. It's kind of fun to get together with, like, especially you, Mario, because you're from the heart of it all in Madeira. And
Thank you.
honor always to have Jim and Tom representing actual descendants of the original trio that made everything. And of course, Shawn, thank you for being a good host and allowing me to look at all the eye candy. I feel so we have a great time here. But I want to let you know, Tom, the Ukulele Hall of Fame is not dead yet. I'm going to try and make it my goal for the year to come to make it foremost on at least the Guild's wish list. We might have some special people that could make this happen. So
Really?
I get to meet one of them Wednesday, so we'll see. So that's just not dead yet. You never know.
That's wonderful to hear. I hope you'll keep me informed, because I'd be very.
Yes, I will.
Wonderful.
Right.
Okay, good.
And last but certainly not least, we are certainly indebted to him. There are others who are not on this this particular session that are also built Mana'o Ukulele Ohana. But Randy is at the heart of this, not only at the nexus of creating this page, but really being the administrator and moderator in many instances, and affording us a platform to be able to have these Zoom sessions and do so in such a way that we can share this information with everyone. So we are deeply indebted to Randy and his efforts to bring us all together, and not only for this particular panel, but also for all of the sessions that you're watching out there. Randy takes care of the Mana'o Ukulele homepage on Facebook, as well as coordinating on the back end. So many discussions about what's coming up and what types of things will be posted, and fielding inquiries and questions and moving things forward. So thank you so much, Randy. Do you have any last words on this particular session for you, Randy?
Yeah, thanks for the kind words, and thanks for putting this together. And I feel like I really learned a lot and thinking about things that I probably wasn't thinking about prior to this session. And I kind of feel like I want to find a little camera or a mirror and start looking inside ukuleles.
Oh, man. Well, I can tell you, Randy, all of us are just looking at the backdrop of Madeira. We all want to jump in the water with you over there.
Yeah, looks like a nice spot. We got to go for it.
Yeah, we have a host over there with Mario. We should all make our way over there and check
Yes.
it out, because it is fantastic. It's a beautiful place. The people are wonderful. The food is fantastic. The music is great. And that was one of the things that I really enjoyed, that when Mario took me around, is I got to see him and some of the lead musicians that play some of these very instruments. Awesome. Viola de aram, the rajao, the machete, see how they were played, the styles they were played, the music that was being played on them. And that was just a true joy. And so one of these days, I hope to come visit you once again, my friend. Some of my good friends here might beat me to it and get over there before me.
Okay.
But you cannot run, because we will contact you by Facebook.
Okay.
So that being said, we're going to close out this session. Everyone stay on for a little bit. We're going to stop recording, but let's say aloha and mahalo to everyone out there. And we will stay tuned for more,
Aloha,
more
aloha,
sessions.
Aloha.
everybody.
Aloha.
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 Aloha.